and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Daniel Smith, and this video is briefly about why you should not rely on groin kicks, least of all for women's self-defense. Many years ago, in fact, 26 years ago, I was a full-time karate student, and my sensei was a very good instructor, but sometimes the women's self-defense part of stuff for the women students often devolved into just kick them in the groin. That was the ultimate solution to everything, was just kick your attacker in the groin. And it's like you don't need a black belt to do that. Um, and like at some point, my sister and this other female black belt, my sister was a brown belt at the time, and this other female was a black belt, and they were laughing at the fact that the only thing women's self defense seemed to be was either gouge them in the eyes or kick them in the groin, which gouge them in the eyes works better than kick them in the groin, by the way, which is the point I'm about to make. The problem with groin kicks is they're actually easy to leg check for experienced fighters. Now, it might work against a drunken fool or an unskilled attacker, but if the attacker has any training whatsoever in fighting, they're going to know what a leg check is and be able to block a groin kick. So you got to teach women something other than just kick the opponent in the nuts for self-defense, even though that's there and you should try it maybe, but don't rely on it. You can kick to the inside or outside of the knee, or you can gouge the eyes, or you can punch or elbow to the throat if necessary. All right, those are certainly targets. You can punch to the solar plexus or kick to the solar plexus if you got a good enough kick. I don't recommend kicking above the solar plexus though, certainly, because that puts you off balance and at risk of ending up on your back with, I don't care how good of a grappler you think you are, especially if you're a woman and you're being attacked by a man, you're going to lose. Literally 99% of the time. You could be a BJJ black belt, and an unskilled 200-pound man will beat the hell out of you before you manage to submit him if you're a woman. So don't deceive yourself into thinking that all of that technical stuff is going to work against a much bigger attacker. It flat out isn't. That's why there's weight classes in MMA now, because they found out that 9 times out of 10, the bigger fighter wins. Even if the smaller fighter is more skilled. All right, so and I watched Michael Calandra, who's a 10th degree Ishinryu karate and Japanese jiu-jitsu black belt, and he told one of his women students at a seminar that because she was even smaller than an average woman, he told her that her only chance to defend against an average man or bigger than average man was to do a 2-thumb eye gouge and gouge the guy's eyeballs out. And the woman replied to him that she didn't think she could do that to somebody in a fight. And he's like, then you will probably never successfully defend yourself if you're ever attacked. He flat out told her, you'll never successfully defend yourself if you're ever attacked, because that's your only chance. The eyes are even more sensitive than the groin. Now, do people get hit in the groin even in pro fighting? Yes, because they don't even defend against it because it's an illegal move in pro fighting. And so they don't think to defend against it. There was a guy, Henry is his last name, but I can't remember his first name. But he got kicked in the groin. It might even have been an intentional foul. And he got hit so hard that he took the full 5 minutes recovery time and could not recover after 5 minutes. And so the fight was called a no contest. And then a few minutes into the next fight, they got news that they had to rush him to the hospital because he was vomiting uncontrollably from a groin kick. So yes, it can work and be debilitating, but that's because he wasn't even defending against it, because he wasn't expecting to get hit by a full power groin kick since it's illegal in the sport. As we were taught to actually attack the groin in class and protect ourselves also, and so the men in the class were like able to leg check groin kicks. So one day I was sparring the black belt woman, and I was a brown belt at this time, probably a 2nd or 3rd degree brown belt, ready to take my black belt test, which I never passed. It wasn't that it wasn't that I wasn't a good fighter. It's that I sucked at kata, by the way. But anyway, I was sparring her, and she got to where she was trying to groin kick every third attack. And I'm like, you're never going to hit me with that unless you distract me with something somehow. I'm like, the men in here trade groin kicks and leg checks just to be sure we can do it. I'm like, you're never going to hit me with a groin kick just out of the blue. You have to actually land something and distract me because I'm going to leg check that every single time. Um, so you know, in real self defense, we mistakenly teach that you're going to be up against an unskilled attacker because we don't expect criminals to be disciplined and take martial arts. But in fact, many criminals are pro boxers or prison boxers or else pro boxers, or they actually have martial arts background, or they're not completely ignorant of martial arts. They know what martial arts is. So you can't drill as if you're going to fight a totally unskilled and ignorant attacker all the time. You don't know if your attacker is as unskilled as they come or if he's a black belt or beyond or somewhere in between. You just flat out don't know that. You have to prepare as if you're up against a competent attacker. Uh, but for years, it's probably still on the internet on YouTube. You just got to put in the right search criteria. But there's a video of an Asian woman who was being harassed by two men in a restaurant, and one of them got up and grabbed her by the arm, and she went into self-defense mode, and she didn't kick him in the groin, and she didn't even gouge him in the eyes. The first thing she did was elbow him and was block his attempt to grab her, and with an outside circle block, and lock his arm down, and with her other arm she elbowed him in the throat, and then she punched him full length in the throat when he took a step back, and he went down straight like that. And then the second guy got up and threw punches and kicks at her too. And she defended herself against him. But you don't know, and this is small men, like 135-pound men. So, and she was about a 115-pound woman. But they didn't expect her to know martial arts. And it's a good thing for her that neither of them knew real martial arts. Because they might have beaten the tar out of her right there on film. But you don't know what the attacker is capable of. You don't know if he's got a knife or a gun or no weapon at all. You don't know if he's a totally unskilled fool or if he's a white belt or a blue belt or a black belt. You don't know. So you have to prepare as if it's going to be the worst case scenario. And to that end, certain kata bunkai and certain drills that I was taught were good and excellent, and some of them were actually pretty useless. Like for example, you're never going to get a reverse neck breaker or a standing back breaker on anybody that's skilled at all. You're hardly even going to get it on an unskilled attacker. But anybody that actually has martial arts training is not going to give up their back that easily to give up a reverse neck breaker or a standing back breaker. And we used to drill that entirely too often in my old sensei's class. We did it almost every class. We would drill passing the guard of a totally unskilled attacker and doing a neck breaker or a standing back breaker. And it's like, this doesn't even feel like it's going to work against somebody that knows what they're doing. It might work against a complete fool, but not everybody is a complete fool. And now that mixed martial arts is so widely published, most people are at least familiar with what not to do to give up their back in a fight. All right. So yes, groin kick is available for women's self-defense, but don't focus on it because it might not save your life. It might cost you your life if that's the only thing you know. You better know something besides the groin kick to defend yourself. Eyes, throat, solar plexus, liver, uh, inside and outside of the kneecap. Attack something other than just the groin, especially if you already tried the groin, because uh, have real fighting skills. A couple weeks ago, I saw a video where the guy, it was in a commentated video because it was a third party video on YouTube where the guy was discussing a woman sparring a man, and she was supposedly a black belt. And you see her bouncing around like they do in this point sparring. And it's like, why do they bounce around like a rabbit? That gives up your feet off the ground, so then you can't change your direction, and then you're vulnerable. So don't bounce around when you fight or spar. And she was sparring an unskilled man, and the unskilled man beat her. And she was supposed to be a black belt, and he wasn't even that much bigger than her. And the commentator was making fun of her and saying, parents, don't put your daughter in a self-defense class that teaches them to fight like this because they're going to get killed. All right, that's all I got to say about that. I spent 10 minutes on this topic.